You know how it is. You wake up in the morning, make your coffee just the way you like it, dress in that suit you've worn more times than you can count, and head out the door, feeling like you've done it all before. Nothing new, just another day at the office. It wasn't that I hated my job. Far from it, actually. I was an office manager at a medium-sized firm that specialized in tech consulting. We had a small, tight-knit team, and I loved the steady rhythm of the work. The clients came in, the spreadsheets were updated, the meetings ran on time, well, most of the time, and the emails flew in and out without much drama. But then there was Michael, my boss. Tall, impeccably dressed, always with that slight crease in his brow that made you wonder if he was deep in thought or simply frustrated with the world. To the outside world, Michael was a little intimidating, but to me, he was just the boss. Professional, respectful, but not one to share much of himself. We'd worked together for 3 years, and the dynamic between us had always been a balance of mutual respect and subtle tension. I could tell he appreciated my work. He often praised me for keeping the office running smoothly. But there was an invisible line that neither of us dared cross. Maybe that's why, after all this time, I felt a certain curiosity about him. It wasn't romantic. No, it was something more intricate, something deeper. Maybe it was because I felt like there was a part of him that was closed off, like he wasn't fully letting anyone in, and I wanted to understand it. And then came that day, the day everything shifted. It started like any other. The coffee was steaming, the office was quiet, and Michael was in his usual corner, behind his desk, glancing at his laptop. I was going over some reports when he called me into his office. "Kate, could you come in for a moment?" he asked. I nodded, pushing my chair back and standing. As I walked toward his office, I felt that small knot in my stomach. It wasn't fear, but more of a heightened awareness. Michael was always professional, but I couldn't help but wonder if this time would be different. When I stepped inside, he looked up, his expression unreadable as usual. "Close the door, please," he said, and I did without thinking. The sound of the door clicking shut seemed to echo in my ears, a moment of quiet before whatever was about to unfold. "Sit down," he gestured to the chair in front of his desk. I did, folding my hands in my lap, waiting for whatever the conversation was about. "I've been thinking," he began, pausing as if choosing his words carefully. "You've been doing excellent work, Kate. Really excellent. But I feel like you've been holding back. Like there's more to you than you're letting show. Do you understand what I mean?" His words caught me off guard, and for a moment I wasn't sure how to respond. Holding back? What did he mean by that? "I'm not sure what you mean," I said, voice soft but steady. Michael leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped in front of him. "I don't think you're giving your full potential here. You're capable of so much more. You have these insights, these ideas, but you rarely share them. Why is that?" I felt my cheeks flush. Was I really hiding something? Or had I simply been playing it safe, keeping my head down and doing what was asked of me? "I'm not sure, Michael," I replied honestly. "I guess I've just been focused on doing my job." He studied me for a moment, and I could see a flicker of something in his eyes. It wasn't judgment. No, it was more like a quiet understanding, a recognition of something unspoken between us. He didn't press further, though. Instead, he gave a small nod and stood up. "All right, that's all. Just something to think about," he said, walking around his desk and toward the window. I stood up, feeling the strange weight of the conversation hanging between us. It wasn't much, but somehow it felt like a pivotal moment. I walked back to my desk, the air of the office feeling different, charged somehow. but I couldn't place why. It was a few days later when the tension I hadn't even realized was building finally broke. I had just finished preparing for an important meeting with a client when Michael walked into the break room where I was grabbing a quick cup of tea. The office was quieter than usual, and it felt like the whole place was holding its breath. "Kate," he said, his voice lower than normal. "Can we talk?" I nodded, setting my tea down and following him into the small conference room, which was always a little too cold and sterile. The walls felt closer in here, like the air was thicker. "About what happened the other day," he started, not looking at me directly. His hands were in his pockets, and he seemed distant. "I don't want you to feel like I was pushing you into something. I just want you to know I see your potential. You don't have to hold back with me." His words hung in the air like a confession, though it wasn't clear what he was confessing to. "I didn't feel pushed, Michael. I struggled for the right words. I just wasn't sure what you meant. I mean, I respect you, but I don't think I'm ready for whatever you might be suggesting." He turned to me then, his expression softened. There was a vulnerability in his eyes, something raw and honest. "It's not about rushing anything, Kate. It's about trusting yourself and trusting the people around you, including me." I stood still, taking in what he said. There was something about his tone that made me believe him, something that made me feel like he genuinely cared about me as more than just an employee. He walked closer, and the space between us seemed to shrink. "I can't promise I have all the answers, but I do want you to feel like you have someone in your corner." In that moment, I realized what had been missing, not just from my work, but from everything. I'd been holding back, and not just with Michael. I'd been doing it with my life. I took a deep breath. "I'll try," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The next few weeks were a blur. Michael and I found ourselves talking more about work, about our pasts, and surprisingly about our lives outside the office. The more we opened up, the more we began to understand each other in ways I hadn't anticipated. There were moments of shared laughter, of quiet understanding, where the office and all its usual chaos faded into the background. It wasn't that we suddenly became best friends or anything. No, it was something subtler than that. It was an emotional connection, a trust that formed quietly between us, like the gradual warming of a room. One afternoon, as the sun began to set and the office grew quieter, Michael came into my office again. This time, there was no tension, no unspoken words hanging in the air. "Kate, I want to thank you," he said, his voice steady. "You've been more open lately, and that's exactly what I needed to see." I looked at him, feeling a warmth spread across my chest. "Thank you, Michael," I replied, genuinely. And then, for the first time, I felt like the distance that had always existed between us was gone. It wasn't dramatic or earth-shattering. It was just right. I understood him, and he understood me. The subtle tension that had once been there had melted into something softer, something real. I left the office that evening feeling lighter than I had in years, not because of anything grand, but because I discovered something important about myself, about Michael, and about the power of letting go. I had always thought I was holding back for fear of being too much, of crossing some line. But that day, I learned the truth. Sometimes the greatest connection happens when you allow yourself to be seen, just as you are.